Grand Valley is a teaching university, and it's focused on the student. And yet, we have research university quality facilities.
Grand Valley is very focused, first and foremost, on the education of our students.
The style at Grand Valley is very hands-on. You work directly with the profs in smaller classroom settings.
So it's a really open environment, a lot of discussion in the classrooms.
We're also really able to apply our skills and our knowledge that we've learned at Grand Valley to make somebody's life better.
Owning and operating a business is the American dream. That is, until HR issues like payroll and taxes, benefits administration, workers' compensation, and regulatory compliance lead to sleepless nights and reduced profits. Keeping focus on the core business and finding the right partners to help with ancillary functions like HR administration is why more than 500 companies across the country turn to Tryon Solutions. Tryon relieves the stress and burden of HR administration, so companies, small to large, can stay focused on why they went into business in the first place. Tryon's size provides client employees access to better benefits and HR services available usually to only large corporations, all while taking employer risk and regulatory strain off client backs. Tryon can help you attract and retain top talent, mitigate risk, and stabilize costs. Check it out at RelyOnTryon.com.
Hello and welcome. Reboot the World Campus Party's first ever digital edition. We are excited to have Todd Cohen, a professional speaker and author, present the life lesson no one will teach you until today. Take it away, Todd.
Jason, thank you so much for that introduction. Short and sweet and right on the money. What I'm going to talk about to everybody listening in, and thank you for those of you who have turned into this stage, the joy of life, on the one lesson nobody will teach you, nobody has taught you until today. And this is the lesson that will help you achieve 4 significant goals. 1, get hired. I don't care what stage you are in life, we all need to get hired. We also need to stay hired. And ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are listening worldwide, remember this. Getting hired is one thing, staying hired is something else. Finally, we want to make money. I don't know anybody who wakes up in the morning and says, I don't need money, I'm okay without having money. We all do something, we all bring a passion to the plate, and hopefully we can monetize that passion. And finally, and perhaps the most important part of this 4-step process, these 4 lessons, which I'm going to teach you today. See, I said 4 lessons. It's actually 1 lesson that is going to help you keep all 4 of these goals, these personal and professional goals in mind, be memorable. And that is something that we all need to think much differently about as we're swimming through this pandemic, as we're going through this unprecedented time when we have to work exceptionally hard and smarter on staying present, getting hired, being hired, making money, and staying memorable. So before I really get into it, I just want to share, my social media with you. If you wouldn't mind throwing out some social media love when you hear something that connects with you, I would be honored and grateful for that. And also, by all means, when this is done, please feel free to link with me on Facebook, Everyone's in Sales, my LinkedIn, TR Cohen, and of course, Twitter at Sales Leader Todd. I'm also on Instagram, and I'll share that with you as well. Finally, I want to take you back a little bit, and I want to begin this lesson with a very personal story. On July 23rd, 2016, this was a pivotal day in my life. This was the day that I heard a doctor say to me, Todd, you have cancer. This wasn't something that anybody wakes up and says, I hope I hear this message today. Now, fortunately for me, I had been tested and I had been tracking a certain form of cancer that when I got the news that the biopsy had been positive, I also got the news at the same time that I was eligible for a very specific high-tech type of surgery that not everybody with my form of cancer was in fact eligible for. Well, to compound the issue a little further, there were only at the time a handful of surgeons right here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA, where I'm at, that do this surgery. In fact, at the time, there were only a handful of surgeons up and down the East Coast that do this surgery. So after doing my research and researching the doctors and getting recommendations and listening to my physician make recommendations to me, I settled on one doctor, Dr. Lee, right here at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was fortunate that somebody with such skill in this procedure was in fact only 20 blocks from where I'm standing right now. I felt extremely fortunate to be able to have an opportunity to meet the person who not only had been doing this surgery for over 15 years, but he was actually somebody who taught other surgeons to do it. So I remember the day that I met Dr. Lee. My appointment at the University of Pennsylvania was at 8:30 in the morning. I arrived at 8:15 and did my check-in. I remember the first person that I met walked up to me and said, Mr. Cohen. And I said, yes, my name is Eric. And he shook my hand. And I said, Eric, what do you do? And he looked at me for a moment and he said, wow, well, I guess the best way to answer that question is, and I said, don't give me your title. I'm not interested in your title because that doesn't tell me anything. And that's where our lesson begins. Eric looked at me and said, well, I get things moving around here. And in a moment, I felt my shoulders go down a little bit. I felt a little more relaxed. And most importantly, I felt a connection. I felt that I was in the right place. I filled out all the paperwork that Eric asked me to fill out, signed everything, and I handed it back to him. And he took it and he flipped through it like this and he smiled and said, I told you I'm here to get things going. And he said, Todd, come with me. He took me into a back room where I was now going to meet Dr. Lee. A few minutes later, I heard a very soft knock on the door. And in walked Dr. Lee. And he looked just like his pictures online. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, as you can imagine, I had already done my research. I had already looked at his electronic brochure. I already knew that he was highly skilled. I knew that he could deal with my cancer. You see, it wasn't about features and benefits. It wasn't about stats and statistics. It was about the connection that hopefully I was about to make. As with Eric, I thought about asking Dr. Lee the same question. I will tell you that he walked over to me and put his hand out and said, Mr. Cohen? I said, Todd, please. He said, I'm David. Nice to meet you. I will point out that Dr. Lee, David, had nothing in his hands. He didn't have anything. He had no phone, nothing to distract him. His attention was all on me. Immediately, he was making a very important decision, which was, I'm going to engage my new patient, my potential new patient, because you see, like everyone else, he has to sell himself. He has to sell what he does. And I already knew the facts and figures. I didn't need him to tell me how good he was. I needed to make that personal connection. I looked at him and I said, David, so what do you do? And I smiled and he smiled. And I knew in that moment the answer to that question, how he would answer that question, would in a moment tell me whether I was in the right place or I was not in the right place. I'll tell you how he answered that question at the end of today's presentation. You know, when it comes to the business world or the personal world, but today the business world, the number one most asked business question ever around the world, the number one most asked business question is, what do you do? What do you do? And how we answer this question is what you're going to learn today. How we answer this question means everything in terms of achieving those 4 goals. Being memorable, getting hired, staying hired, and yes, making money. What do you do? You see, ladies and gentlemen, the most important lesson that no one has ever taught you is how we answer this question, because this is how we define whether or not we can truly sell ourselves. Because the common denominator of success, the common denominator throughout your career is not just how smart you are or how good you are or how technically savvy you are or how brilliant you are, because I trust everybody listening to me right now on this stage has all of those things. And can you sell it? And that begins with how you answer that question. What do you do? You see, there are new rules, and these rules were established back in 2008 when we had a global economic collapse. These rules change how we sell ourselves forever. And the first rule is titles are meaningless. Titles don't matter. If you are hinging your self-identity, your self-worth, your ability to impress people with your title, today is the day that you have the magnificent opportunity to rethink that perspective. Because today, as we learned in 2008, titles don't matter. If we're going to sell ourselves, what helps you stay in business is how meaningful of a relationship you build with the customer, and how you're going to help me stay in business begins with, what do you do? Not what your title is. Because you see, your title doesn't tell me anything. The relationships that we all have an opportunity to build every single day begin with personal engagement. And in the business world, when we're networking, it continues. Relationships continue because of the value people see in you, not your title, not your resume, not your CV, not your technical skills. You see, we'll get to that. We have to find a way, friends, to open the conversation. We have to find the perfect way to get people to say, tell me more. What does that mean? You see, when people hear a title, they automatically make a judgment. That judgment either shuts down conversation or it inspires them to engage you. We can't have those opportunities shut down. Many of you may remember or have played with or have even solved the Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube is a perfect analogy for what I'm talking about today. In the world we live in the complex world we live in, it takes multiple people to solve our goals, to achieve our goals, to solve our problems, to help us get to where we want to get to. We can't do it all by ourselves. We need people to help us achieve our goals. The most important lesson also includes the fact that, like a Rubik's Cube, we're constantly moving it around. We're constantly looking for new people to build relationships with. We're constantly asking people, what do you do? And hopefully the answer, the lesson I'm going to teach you today, will be enough for you to say, for us to say, tell me more. That's how we begin the personal relationships. That's how we've evolved relationships from personal to professional. That's how we evolve and not only get hired, stay hired, make money, but it's how we stay memorable. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a big deal. And this is the lesson nobody's ever taught you. So today, I'm going to give us all the opportunity to see sales, personal sales, through a brand new lens, a brand new sense of how we view these conversations. The rules established in 2008 continue. You see, to stay top of mind, we need to change the conversation. And in this world we're in right now, in this pandemic, when we don't have all of the opportunity to connect with people live, we have to do more. We have to work harder. And I'm here to teach you the life lesson that will serve you not only during a pandemic, it will accelerate your professional standing in the world when we're out of this. You see, our goal by answering this question, what do you do effectively, means we must differentiate and stand out. If you hook your self-identity, if you hook people's ability to connect with you on a title, you're going to lose the fight. You're going to be non-special. You're not going to be differentiated. Now, that's not to say that in certain instances, titles don't matter. As an opener, as a way for people to actually engage you and build a relationship, people don't build relationships with titles. They build relationship with, you know the answer to this, with people. We have to differentiate and stand out from the crowd, because the reality of it is many of you who are listening to me right now do technically similar or the same things. But why would I choose any one of you over somebody else? Because when I ask you what you do, you've answered that question in a way that gets me to say, tell me more. Tell me more about what you do. You see, our mentality about how we sell ourselves has forever changed. It's no longer just based on a transaction. Here's my resume, I do this. Here's my skill set, I do this. You should understand, no, I don't. You see, our ability to get hired, stay hired, make money, and be memorable begins and ends with a relationship mindset. And the lesson of how we answer the question, what do you do, is the lesson that I'm going to teach you today. You do something that people need. That's a guarantee. For every single person listening to me, I don't even need to see your face. I don't even need to meet you. I know in my heart that you do something people need. People wake up in the morning and they have a passion, and that passion creates value. Can you describe it? What is it that you do that people need? That much I trust. Now that we know that you do something that people need, okay, so what do you do? And right now, as I said a moment ago, you can't lead, you cannot answer that with your title. You see, your ability to answer the question, what do you do, is not about anything but you. You see, this is called your value proposition, your personal value proposition. Whatever else you may have already learned in school or in business or in graduate programs or from mentors or teachers or coaches about value proposition, put it aside for just a moment. Don't disregard it, because the term value proposition has many, many meanings. Today, your value proposition begins and ends with the passionate belief that it's about what you do, and it's about you, not what your job description says, not what your CV or your resume says. It's not about anything that I can't understand. It's all about you and my ability and desire to build a relationship with you, and ultimately say, I want to hire you. I want to keep you hired. I want to pay you, and I want you to be memorable, because to me right now, you are memorable because I know what you do. Now, many of you right now might be rolling your eyes and thinking, this feels uncomfortable. It should, because this is the hardest lesson any of us can ever learn, because it forces us out of our comfort zones. It forces us to come out from behind the resume and the CV, and it forces us to actually sell ourselves by building relationships, by demonstrating to people that I'm somebody that you want to connect to because I'm interesting and I find you interesting as well. You know, what's so remarkable about this is we are our own gatekeepers to relationships. Nobody gets to say to us who we can and cannot have relationships with. That's the beauty of being who we are. You are the gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper, the key to that gate is how you answer that question. What do you do? There's an awful lot of people out there who do what you do technically, but they don't necessarily know what you do here and how you're going to help me stay in business. So if you're in the position to write anything down right now, write this down. How do I help people stay in business? Every vendor that I work with understands that when I ask them what they do, they don't say to me, I'm your web designer, I'm your graphics designer, I'm your IT specialist, I'm your programmer, I built your app. That doesn't mean anything to me. They say to me, they answer the question in a way that says, what I'm doing is going to help you stay in business and make money. So for example, my web developer says, I keep your web up and running so people can order from you. I keep your digital footprint alive. Think about that. I'm your web designer, or I keep your digital footprint alive. You see, when I hear I'm a web designer, I think, okay, well, my web is fine. My website's fine. I don't need you. And that ends the conversation. But if that same person answers the question shorter and crisper and says, I help you with your digital presence. I help people find you on the web. Now he's got my interest. You see, now he's got me to say, hey, tell me more about that. Well, how do you do that? What does that mean? And you know the beauty of that? You've just sold me. Yes, you've just proven that you can sell. You see, sales isn't a bad thing. It's understanding what it is and what it isn't. You have this enormous and glorious opportunity to be the gatekeeper of relationships. And that key is how you answer that question, what do I do? And again, at the end of today's presentation, I'll share with you what Dr. Lee said to me when I said to him, what do you do? So I call this building a sales culture. Sales culture means we're all in sales. I've written a book called Everyone's in Sales, and it talks about how we all sell each other every single day, how we sell ourselves every day. It talks about how the root of this, the common denominator of our ability to, you know where I'm headed with this, our ability to get hired, stay hired, make money, be memorable, begins with what I said a moment ago, your personal value proposition. You see, your value proposition is how we answer that question, what do you do? Some of you on the call, maybe many of you, have heard the term the elevator pitch. You see, many years ago, the elevator pitch was, what it meant was, well, you have about 30 to 45 seconds, in this case, say 30 seconds to impress. It's as if you got onto an elevator and someone said to you, what do you do? And you have somewhere between 30 and 45 seconds between the time the elevator started and the time it ends to impress somebody. The problem is the elevator pitch is broken. It doesn't work anymore because we make it about ourselves. We spend all this time talking about who we are, what we do, our title, where we went to school, how great we are, all of our accomplishments. And not once have we given the person in the elevator, and the elevator, by the way, is both real and metaphorical. Not once have we given that person a moment to say, tell me more, or found out whether they're even understanding what we're saying. So the elevator is broken. The elevator pitch is dead. In fact, if we're going to find that people often, the more we speak about ourselves, the more resistant they become. The more we go on and on and on and on about me without telling me what you do, the more resistant they may come. Now, you may be thinking, but Todd, a moment ago you said it's about you. Yes, it is. It's about me understanding how I'm going to help you, how I'm going to answer that question. What do you do with a set of words that say, tell me more? Remember, my web designer could say, well, my name is John Smith and I'm a web designer and I built 42 webs and and I'm like, okay, whatever. Or my name is John Smith. I improve digital footprint. Which do you think I'm going to listen to? Well, it's the latter, of course. If people are resistant, you must ask yourselves this question. Am I saying too much about my accomplishments and my title and where I've been and what I've done and how wonderful I am? Or am I demonstrating in a few words that I can connect with you? Obviously, that's where we're headed today. You see, the average attention span is somewhere between 7 and 10 seconds. Do you know that people make a buying decision on you in that much time or less? You see, when I ask you what you do, you don't have 30, 45, 60 seconds to tell me what you do. You have somewhere between 7 and 10 seconds, 4 to 6 to 7 to 8 words. That's it. And it better be something that gets me to say, that inspires me to say, tell me more. I improve your digital footprint. I believe everyone's in sales. In fact, it can be argued that this goldfish has a longer attention span than most people. In fact, I believe this to be true because you know what? In today's day and age, we're all tied to this, or our watches, or our iPads, or whatever form of multiple digital communications we look at throughout the day. Our attention spans have never been less. Well, as attention spans fall, tolerance for listening to you talk about yourself in a way that's not meaningful to me falls as well. In fact, maybe attention spans are about the same as this gnat. What I know is this, I don't know the exact seconds. I think it's constantly being studied. I'm sure somebody who's listening in on this right now will have this answer. But I think we can all agree it's very short. So if we miss the opportunity to answer that question, what do you do in a way that's meaningful and that inspires me to say, wait, you sound different, tell me more. It's as if you hear some music and no one cares. Because in 2008, in that economic downturn, what we learned was titles don't matter when it comes to the initial opportunity to sell yourself. Stephen Covey said this the best, and I still think this is one of the most important lessons we can learn that relates and validates what I'm sharing with you today, how we answer that question, what do you do? Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. So if you give up the opportunity to inspire somebody when they've given you the gift of tell me what you do, and you default to a title, or you default to something that's not understandable, or I can't identify with, or automatically triggers some bias or some misunderstanding, well, then we've lost the opportunity to sell ourselves, build a relationship, engage, and you know what's coming. Get hired, stay hired, make money, be memorable. So the central theme of today is, why should I engage you and not him or her or them? And this isn't about features and benefits. This isn't about, as I've said repeatedly, where you went to school, all your accomplishments. You see, I can read that online. When I met Dr. Lee for the first time, I had already looked at all his accomplishments. I had already researched him. I had gone to the University of Pennsylvania medical website and I looked at all his statistics. I didn't need to know that anymore. What I needed to know was, why should I engage him versus a handful of other surgeons, many of which I did interview? And I will share with you, when I interviewed other surgeons and I said, what do you do? They started telling me all about themselves. I've done this, I've done that, I'm this, I'm that, I've got this I got that. And I already knew all that. You see, what they weren't sharing with me was why they're different. They weren't looking for a way to engage with me as a human. Your value proposition needs to be what I call agnostic. Now, not agnostic in a religious sense. Agnostic meaning what you do has to come from here, your heart, not your head. You see, up here is where we store features and benefits. Here is where we store, where we keep, where we preserve your ability to identify with me and say, this is why I'm a safe person to hire. I'm a good person and a safe person to keep hired. This is why I'm memorable. And yes, this is why I'm worth the money that you're paying me. You see, it needs to be agnostic without identifying markers. Don't tell me where you went to school. Don't tell me your title. I know you've heard this a number of times, and I'm going to keep reminding you of this. Don't tell me things I can already look up or that might imply or trigger a bias. Some people have a bias against a certain title. And if you think that that's not the case, if you wonder why people don't want to engage you, that's why. You see, your value proposition, how you sell yourself, is rooted in how you see yourself, not the words necessarily that you use. How do you feel about your value? If I asked you to take out your business card right now and scratch out your title and scratch out the name of your company, and it's only your name and a logo, and you handed it to me and I said, well, tell me what you do, what would you say? It's not easy, is it? And in a moment, I'm going to share with you how you can begin this journey and set yourself apart to get hired, stay hired, get money, and be memorable. And this isn't about the words. And I think one of the other most important things we need to remember here is not to overthink this, because this is such a hard, challenging lesson, because it's something that we're not used to hearing. And yes, nobody teaches this. I lecture at colleges and universities and corporations all over the world. And the one thing I hear repeatedly is, why hasn't somebody taught us this before? Because it's not a common lesson. And we should have all learned this around the world in 2008. But too many people have become complacent. Today is the day that you're not going to let that happen. So now what? We have to unlock that key. Unlock the lock with the key and begin that journey of what do? You have to figure it out. But ironically, it's not up to you. Now you're confused, right? Now you're wondering, where is this guy going? Where is Todd going with this statement? Hang on, here it is. Let me introduce to you the concept, the principle of vulnerability is nobility. You know, vulnerability is hard. Vulnerability means that you have to be an excellent listener. Vulnerability means that you have to be willing to listen more than you speak. Vulnerability means that you have to be willing to hear people, hear what they have to say, and not get defensive. Vulnerability means that you must be approachable. Vulnerability means, ready? That you have to demonstrate that you are the same as everybody else, meaning you're a human on this planet and you deal with and have the same challenges that we all do. Vulnerability is nobility. When you can demonstrate vulnerability, that is a noble cause. That is a brilliant skill that you can now bring to advance your professional standing. Because people who are vulnerable show that they're real, show that they're approachable, and show that they're worthy of a relationship. Worthy of a relationship. Nobody wants to engage or build a relationship with somebody who they feel doesn't understand them. Vulnerability means that you're patient, that you understand that relationships take time. This picture is from a long time ago, a long time ago. And the gentleman on the right was my father. His name was Marvin Cohen. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the US. The young guy on the left, well, that's me. I was quite a bit younger than this handsome devil you see in front of you right now. My father built a business as a wedding photographer in the city of Pittsburgh without ever once having a business card, a website, nothing that we all enjoy. The privileges of electronic digital footprint that we all enjoy today. His ability to build his business rested solely on his ability to answer the question, what do you do? So when people would ask him what you do, he never said, I'm a photographer, because that didn't mean anything. Lots of people are photographers. What he said set him apart. What he said showed his vulnerability. What he said showed his humanity. What he did proved that he was worthy of further conversation. What he said was, I make people smile, just like I'm doing right now. My father passed away 30 years ago, and I still hear him to this day saying to people, I make people smile. To this day, I remember the look on people's faces, and they would say, as they were smiling, what does that mean? Are you a clown? And he would say, no, I'm a photographer. I make brides and grooms relish and revel in the happiest day of their lives. And never once did he say, I'm a photographer. You see, that's what I mean by agnostic. He kept the conversation up here. He kept it in a way that made him human, not sunk him down to the level of a title. So when I talk about vulnerability is nobility, this is what this means. Find somebody, find 3 people, 3, 4, 5, the more the merrier, and ask them this question, 3, 4, 5 people that you've worked with, that know you, that understand your value, that see you beyond a resume or a CV or what's written about you. And ask them this question, which is the ultimate in vulnerability. And this is such a hard question to ask, and it will bring you marketing, riches, and gold. The question is simple. You've known me for a long time. You've worked with me. What is it that you think that I do? What is it that you believe I contribute? What do you think my value is beyond my title? You see, when you ask that question, that is the ultimate act of vulnerability. And it is also the ultimate act of honesty and humanity. And it sends the message, the same very message that my beloved father sent for years, was that he's approachable, was that I don't think that I know it all. I don't think that I'm better than anybody. I want you to help me sell myself. My goodness, ladies and gentlemen, if we could all practice vulnerability is nobility, we would have no problem getting hired, staying hired, getting people to pay us the wages we believe we deserve. And most no. And I say, I understand. That's the reaction I get. Here's what I do. I don't do sales training. I do sales culture. What does that mean, Todd? Well, it helps me help people like you stay employed. It helps me help folks like you identify and rise to the top and be differentiated. I teach people who aren't afraid to sell. You see, the way I answer that question is the same way my father answered that question. The same way I'm going to share with you how Dr. Lee answered that question. It was about them, not about me. It was about showing somebody how to be in business and excel. So I come back to the same question. If you can say that you're truly approachable, and approachability means you have a smile on your face, you're engaging. You're not standing there with your phone sending a message to the world, stay away. If you are approachable, then you are already halfway there to being an outstanding salesperson. Because people who are approachable are people that can say, tell me more about you. You see, to effectively sell yourselves, and I want you to write this down, we have to understand the impact that we have on other people, the impact that we will have on others. Because that's why I'm asking you what you do. I'm not asking you so you can tell me your life story. I'm asking you to tell me what you do so I understand how, when I hire you and keep you hired and pay you good wages, why you're going to be memorable and how you're going to help my world be successful. My father made sure people smiled. Dr. Lee said something that finally engaged me to hire him and save my life. What people remember, ladies and gentlemen, is not your title. They remember the impact, the value, the difference you make on them and their lives and their businesses. And that's not because they understand your title, it's because they understand you. What I want you to take away, if nothing else, hopefully you've taken a lot away today. What I want you to understand and remember is that every conversation you have fulfills 3 bold purposes. It's a selling moment, meaning you're selling yourself with every conversation. What does that mean? With every single time you interact with somebody, whether it's an email, a text message, or like this, or live, they're making a decision on you. You're leaving an impression. You're sending a message that says, this is a person I want to talk to. You're inspiring them to continue the conversation. That's sales. It's a networking opportunity. The first rule of networking is the same rule as building your personal value proposition. It's not about you. Don't give me your life story. It's about them. And it's an opportunity to coach others around you to do better, to be more, to share their brilliance. You have such an opportunity starting today to reboot your world, to reboot how the world sees you, to be memorable. Do not waste a single word. Do not waste an opportunity. Well, I promised you that I would share with you how Dr. Lee answered that question. I thought I would share with you 3 pictures first. The picture in the lower left-hand corner is 1 year after my surgery for my first year check, when thankfully everything looked good. The picture in the upper left-hand corner, that's 2 years. The picture in the upper right-hand corner, that's 3 years. That was this past November. Notice Dr. Lee hasn't changed. I've aged. He hasn't. This man saved my life because of how he answered the question, what do you do? And not once did he look at me like, how dare you ask me that? Or why are you asking me that? Don't you know who I am? You see, he wasn't arrogant. He wasn't pompous. He wasn't full of himself. He was approachable. He was vulnerable. He was full of humility. He was absolutely somebody where I knew in an instant that I was in the right place. When I asked Dr. Lee, so what do you do? He answered the question by saying, I'm going to get you back on your feet. I will work to get you back on your feet. That was the reason I put my life in Dr. Lee's hands. And I am here 3.5 years later, I believe, because of how he answered that question. Now, if he had walked in and said, well, I'm this, that, and the other, doesn't matter. Hopefully I still would have had the same result. But you see, I have a choice, as do people looking at you. People have choices. People have choices. Do I hire you or do I hire you? Do I keep you? Do I fire you? And how you answer this question, how you impact people's belief that you can help them be better, that's why you're memorable. So no longer do we use our titles. No longer do we use something that's not identifiable. Starting today, we're going to reboot who we are. And the most important lesson that you've never learned until today, how do we answer that question? What do you do? Well, you're going to practice vulnerability is humility. Find people who know you and ask them, how do you see my value? How did I help you stay in business? How did I help your business advance? I dare you. It's the hardest thing in the world to do, and it's the one thing that you can do to unlock the secret to being memorable. If you're educating somebody, you're selling. If you're providing guidance, you're selling. If you're passionate, you're selling. If you're asking for something, you're selling. If you have a point to make, you're selling. If you are influencing, you're selling. If you want to lead, you're selling. Every conversation is a selling moment. And it so beautifully begins. Wherever you're headed, whatever your goals are, your ability to answer this question and sell yourself will mean the difference between getting hired or not, staying hired or not, making okay money or great money, and being memorable. I'm the guy who will get you back on your feet. I make people smile. I increase your digital footprint. That's how we sell. Jason, do we have any questions? All right.
Thank you, Todd. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is, what if I'm afraid of selling?
Yeah, no, I get that one. I get that all the time. And, because lots of people are afraid because when they hear the word selling, we revert back to the stereotype of selling. We revert back to, salespeople are icky or they're bad or they're slimy. And, a lot of times that's true because that's the stereotype of selling. That's why this particular slide up on screen right now is so important. You see, selling is all of these things that I'm sharing with you now. Everything else is the stereotype of sales. I don't like those people who make that stereotype come to life either. I run from them. You see, selling starts here. Selling is about educating and guiding and influencing and coaching and mentoring and helping people be better. You see, we all have to influence people every single day. That's selling. So if you're afraid of selling, the trick is to simply redefine what selling is. And that's what I'm providing you right here. And oh, by the way, the next conversation you have with somebody, when you have to convince somebody of something, maybe to have your kid eat their peas or convince somebody to give you budget or convince your boss to promote you, that's sales. You're doing it whether you realize it or not. So don't fall victim to the stereotype. Anything else, Jason?
Yes. Other than putting down our phones, how do we become more approachable?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, I do a whole keynote on being present, but let me give you some tips right now. First of all, eye contact is a perfect beginning to be approachable. Using people's names makes you approachable. So if you're at a networking event and you see a name badge, don't go, hey, go, hi, John. Put your hand out, eye contact. That makes you approachable. Believe it or not, smiling is approachable. How you show up, how you dress sends a message that you're taking something seriously. That is approachability. Walking into an organization or a room or showing up on a video like this and leaning in and simply looking at your camera and being engaged is approachability. You see, approachability isn't a trick. It's how you choose to show up. It's the message you want to send. Look, we all know what it feels like to walk into a room, whether it's a virtual room or a real room, and see somebody on their phone. You're not going to go running up to that person, right? Or look at somebody who's standing in a corner and looking very uncomfortable. They're not approachable. They're sending off a message that I'm uncomfortable, I'm shy, don't come near me, whatever it might be. Being approachable is a choice. And sometimes it takes taking a deep breath, maybe 6 deep breaths, putting a smile on your face and saying hello to somebody, or simply standing there making eye contact. Simply sending the message that I'm here, ask me a question. And usually how I see your face, how I see you is a true giveaway to that. And I could talk for days on this, and perhaps on Reboot the World next year, or you're welcome to get in touch with me and I'll be happy to share some more tips on that. But it's all about being present. Present.
Great.
Jason?
Great. Now, a follow-up to that isn't my technical skill enough to get me what I need?
No, because so many people have the same technical skills. You know, there are certainly instances where your technical skills will open the door. Your title could open a door. Your technical skills will absolutely start the conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, if you can't take that conversation beyond being identified as technical skills, you're not differentiated, you're not memorable. Your ability now is to take your technical skills and sell me, show me how those skills will help me help you be better, help you be more successful. That's the difference maker for you. That's where the difference comes in. You see, your technical skills will open a door, no question about it. Your technical skills may open multiple doors, but you have to get in there and build a relationship and sell it. That's the difference.
Great. Looks like we have time for one more question. So someone is saying, I don't like to sell because of rejection. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so rejection is a myth. You know, there's this notion of I don't want to sell because of rejection is it literally is a myth because you know, rejection is a personal thing. Rejection is something where somebody says, you know what, I'm not doing this because I don't like you personally. That has nothing to do with selling. That has to do with, you know, our ability to build better relationships. Rejection in a professional setting is a myth. Unless somebody says to you, I'm not hiring you because I don't like you personally, it's not rejection. It's somebody doesn't have enough information. Somebody doesn't feel they know you well enough. Somebody isn't willing to take a chance. Somebody isn't willing to do X, Y, and Z to give you that platform. True rejection, true bona fide rejection is a myth. And it doesn't exist. It's a personal thing. And that's why you shouldn't get hung up in rejection. In fact, it makes me crazy when someone says, oh, I didn't get accepted to college, or I didn't get the job, I got rejected. No, you didn't. You just didn't meet certain guidelines. It's not personal. When I was applying to colleges, I got rejected to 80% of the schools I applied to, but they didn't even know me, so it couldn't be personal. They never met me. It was based on numbers on a piece of paper, which is a whole nother conversation, which is why your ability to get in there and sell and build a relationship makes all the difference in the world. Then, only then, can we change the conversation.
Todd, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been absolutely phenomenal. You've been kind of like a virtual caffeine for all of us. So we appreciate your insight. And I think I'm speaking for many of us out there in virtual land. And we'll say that I feel that you've given us exactly what we need to do to reboot ourselves.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you for that, Jason. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am convinced that what I've shared today is a lesson that most people just haven't learned truly how to get at it. Now you do. And I am certainly available to continue the conversation with anybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you.
And now we're going to thank a few of our sponsors.